I have a very clear memory of this album coming out because there's, I think, a 3-day difference between when In Utero drops and when I start my late night television show.
Oh, wow.
And I remembered the music on the album, because I was such a huge fan, being such a background music to the terror and the weirdness of me starting a late night show from complete obscurity in 1993. So
that's similar to the Nirvana experience, I would imagine. That, at the time when the band became popular in 1991, we were so young.
Yeah.
I think I was 21 or 22 and you might have been 25 or something, but we were
kids. You're kids.
We were kids.
Yeah.
And so, when you talk about the amount of time that's gone by, to me, it's not even so much about the years. It's about the experiences that just kind of led one after another, going from 3 kids that were basically living or touring out of a van to them becoming a huge band, and then In Utero becoming the sort of the uncomfortable soundtrack to that sort of transition. I think like shit. That was a night by 1992, 1993. We were living in a different world than we were just 16 months before,
I was thinking about it today, and I was thinking the only way that you can understand the making of In Utero is to understand where you were at that time. The only way to understand that is to start with the Nevermind, which had its Geffen Records, modest expectations by the record label. I think they were going to be very happy if you sold 250,000 units.
They printed 50,000 units of the CDs. 50,000.
50,000. Thinking that should do it, and if we have to make more, we will. I talked to someone who was working at Geffen at the time. They said when Nevermind hit and started to blow up, and then really blow up, at one point they had to stop making and manufacturing all of the other CDs for the other artists on their label and turn them all over to making Nevermind, which sounds like something that just doesn't happen. It was completely unprecedented. And so that's the good news. But with that comes all kinds of bullshit.
Well, you mentioned time, Conan, and so like personally, that was 30 years ago, but that time from when Nevermind released and then Kurt died, what happened in that span of time feels like it was 10 years.
Yeah.
It was so much going, there was so much intense. Yeah.
I was just thinking for me, it took my entire childhood to prepare me for adolescence, right? And then it took my entire adolescence and young adulthood to prepare me for being gainfully employed and independent as a person, right? So like you have a long runway for like the major stages in your life. And like Nirvana went from being couch surfers to being the biggest band ever in the world in a span of about 18 months.
You guys are responsible for an industry. And the thing that occurs to me is that fame, money, success is great news for a lot of artists in the business, a lot of music artists. If you come from the punk world and you are religious adherents to the punk ethos, which you guys were and Kurt was, success is tricky because there's so many artists, if they make a lot of money, go out and get a Bentley. Jesus, the Beatles were very comfortable going out and getting a Rolls Royce and painting it.
It was either that or pay 90% taxes.
Right. Okay, well, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. And we're going to do a second one when we get into taxation. But what I wanted to point out was there's a whole culture of, yay, we made it, and we throw money around. There's almost a shame and a trap that's set if you're part of the punk ethos, isn't there?
So this is something that I have run into over and over and over again, is people outside the music scene, people who are not band members, not musicians, not part of the culture of punk at all, ascribing to punks this notion that success is bad, and this notion that if you are successful, you are somehow bad and evil, and that we don't want people to become successful. I have never experienced that genuinely from anybody anyone in the punk scene that wasn't purely an expression of jealousy.
Right.
On the whole, Nirvana's fans wanted Nirvana to become successful and self-sustaining and be loved. There's a kind of a sniping that is ascribed to people in the music scene that didn't exist. It's a critical creation, when what actually happened was a lot of people, in an aspirational way, grasping for success, did all kinds of grotesque, whorish things to try to secure success for themselves, material success or artistic success or whatever. And that was reacted negatively toward by everybody who was, sincere about what they were doing. So I just wanted to clear the air and say, like there was no animosity toward Nirvana.
Not
as
animosity
a
towards.
band.
I'm talking about the band itself. I'm talking about.
Well, it's
I'm
funny.
talking about Kurt, or maybe you guys feeling I'm talking about two feelings: immense pride that you're the number one band in the world, and maybe a little bit of Jesus.
Well,
what the fuck?
I think. Well, okay, so. Before we made the record Nevermind, we were pretty much living in squalor, right? So I was living with Kurt in this tiny little apartment, and there were just corn dog sticks and cigarettes all over the place, and it was pretty
awful.
Fucking disgusting.
Yeah.
I would have done anything to have my own apartment, and to be able to do that through making music, to actually. It also, I know that the transition happened really quickly, but it didn't happen. You didn't just wind up with $1 million in your mailbox the next day.
Right.
It went from being like, the per diem went up to $15 a day. I was like, oh my God, that means I can get 2 packs of cigarettes or whatever. And then, went from.
This couldn't possibly get better. Like,
I honestly
exactly.
Felt that
I'm
way.
saying that's how it feels.
Oh my gosh, we're staying in a motel. I'm sharing a room with Kurt or whatever, but it's not someone's floor. And then just small things. And then from September to December of 1991 is when everything really blew up. And I really didn't feel conflicted or any guilt or shame in knowing, like, oh, I just paid off my mother's house.
Yeah.
Or I bought my mother a car. Or now I can afford to, buy a new pair of shoes or whatever it was. I didn't. And I think the reason why I personally didn't feel so conflicted about everything was because I knew that the band hadn't done anything outside of our true selves to get there. We just did the thing that we did, and then it happened. And so that was just my experience after. And then I got to move in with another friend and have a house. And I remember, it's funny you talk about the Bentley. Remember that fucking weird Yugoslavian car that you bought?
Did you own a Yugo?
No, what was it? Didn't you get some car? Didn't you buy some car that was like this tiny thing?
Oh, the Renault Dauphine.
Oh, that's what it was.
Somebody gave it to me.
Oh, right.
Wait, that was your rock star moment? Is that someone gave you a Renault Dauphine, which sounds like a shoe more than a car?
I barely fit in it. I got it running pretty good.
But yeah, I mean, of course, we didn't go straight to the Bentleys and stuff like that. But I mean, I was very happy to have finally been able to really support myself as a musician.